gentlemen, good morning. I am Delta Bird, and I made a complete UI pack for Pixel Game Maker MV to start you off on your projects. This entire project is free to use. All resources are also free to use and credited from their artists or from the native Pixel Game Maker MV download. This is what the UI does, and I'm going to walk through the actual programming logic of it shortly. And if you just play test it from the beginning, you're going to see that you have your basic character with some items on the ground, a tower on the left, and a whole UI that you can play around with. So what this does, basic character, you'll see some items on the ground, you'll see a tower to your left, but I'd like to point your attention to the top right. I have a day system implemented up here that'll tell you what day you're on, whether you're in morning or night, and how many days you've spent inside your game. And this is not in real time. No, this is based on based on game progression, and you can go through that whichever way that you want. Also on the bottom, you'll see some keyboard keys, and you'll see here on the bottom right, as I press buttons, they kind of reflect what's being pushed. Right, which is it's just something that I wanted in my game, and I figured I would pass that along to you as well. Over here is a currency counter, and as I walk over here, I will pick up those little coins, and my currency will increase. In the center is an item box. Right now it's empty, but I can open up my inventory. And there's some basic items in there that the player will start with for the default. It is a red book, a blue book, and a phone. Something new that I implemented since the last version of my UI is item descriptions here at the bottom. And you'll see that the item descriptions pop up if you have the item, but it will not pop up if you do not have the item. So we'll go ahead and select the red book. Now, as long as it kind of popped up for a second there because I pressed the wrong button. But if you have the red book selected and you press use item, it will bring up a book. And you can put whatever text that you want on the book, and it'll be as if the player is reading said book. This one I programmed to be in a different language. So if the player uses it, it'll say, hey, I can't read this. So different options here that you can kind of use to your advantage. And the phone, similarly to the book, will bring up a phone. And what I plan on doing in future versions of this UI is actually have a phone UI implemented that, again, you can use free inside your projects. So we'll go ahead and close that out for a minute. Okay. Now this tower, this is going to function as a time pass object. Press X for interact. Here, let me get rid of that. There we go. So I press C, and it now says rest until evening. All right, gives me the prompt, yes or no. Yes. And now it's dark out, and the time of day has moved on to evening. Now this is the same scene that you were in before. No changes have been made, but a darken filter has been applied, and a switch to nighttime mode has been made. So if we interact with this tower one more time, it's going to ask me if I want to sleep until morning. Yes, of course I do. Bam. Now the dark filter has been removed. It is now the morning again, and you will also see in the top right, it is now Tuesday, day 2. And you can keep on doing this for days and days and days. When it gets to Sunday, it's going to reset to Monday, and every time, and you will go from morning to evening to morning to evening from morning to evening. The day counter will, however, go until infinity. So essentially you can have your player in the game for however many days you want. Okay, now if we open the inventory, you're going to see that there's not very many items here. Alright, we'll select the book for now. Okay, and here's where I'm going to pick up all my items. Every single time I walk up to them, I pick up the item. So let's open up the inventory. Bam, there they are. They've been added to my inventory. And now, as I select them, the inventory descriptions show. And it will continue to not show even if I do not have it. Alright, let's go ahead and close the inventory. Alright, now I have all the items, and I can pretty much select whatever I want. Bam. That's pretty much it. The rest, so you can use this however you want. The rest of it is is for you to create your own scenes and change the art to whatever items that you want to see implemented. Change the descriptions to whatever you want to see be displayed whenever your player uses them. Also, the only things that you can really press use item on are these 3 items. So right now what we're going to end up doing is going through the logic to kind of see how I did all the things that I did. Now the order of operations, first and foremost, is of course going to be resources. You always throw in your resources first. This white-haired boy is from Graphics Kit on itch.io. This is also free to use. You can go to his page and download it. I edited it slightly because he had headphones on, and I didn't want my guy to have headphones on. The items, there's plenty of item packs that you can get for free on itch.io or around the internet. I've played around with this one a little bit, but all of these are free to use as well. The coins, I have several different types. I'm only using the gold one for now. And, of course, the UI items. Alright. Several different things that you can poke through. Now, these tiles that I threw in here, these are from other Pixel Game Maker sample projects, so these are free to use as long as you own the engine. There's some text resources in here that basically these things show what shows up whenever you select an item. These are the item descriptions right here. This is the text resources for interacting with the tower. When I created this project, it was originally a bed. And of course, item use. Alright, so whenever you want to use an item and you want to tell it, hey, I want this thing to say this whenever the item is used, that's where you can go. You don't have to do it my way. You can do it whichever way that you want. Switches. I have a nighttime switch and some memory slot switches. We'll go through these later. Variables. Now the current slot and the current item are different variables. You'll see why. I'm going to go through them in a moment. And of course, a variable for every single slot that I have in the inventory. I have a time of day slot, a day number slot, and a day of week slot. This reflects whether it's morning or evening. This one will reflect whether it's day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 999 or whatever your max number is. And this one will show whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. These sound effects are for free use. These were found on itch.io as well. And so have the fonts. Okay, objects. This is where we're really getting into things. Now, the tower here is, in my project, when I originally made this, it was a bed. For you, it's a tower. Okay, this is in its waiting state. This is the default action. Now, if you interact with it, if you walk up to it and you press B, right, and I have these two conditions here. This is important. So one, discovered by other objects. So I have a field of view on this object, and a player, as long as it's seen by the player group, and also Nighttime has to be off. The reason why I have this switch is to differentiate the text that it displays when you interact with it. It's going to ask you if you want to sleep until morning or rest until evening. That's why I have two different branches here. Let's say I select sleep until evening. It's going to change the game speed. It's going to show a message, ask you if you want to rest until evening, and then show you choices. Now, in order to get this thing right here, the show choices thing is actually a plugin. And you can get that easily. What you want to do, tools, plugins, and then you're going to come here, right click, add official plugin, and I have show choices and show message, and they are right here. So you want to check that, and you will now have those as plugins in your game. Back to the objects. So show choices, once you have that ticked, will show up right here in plugins. Alright, now if you select no, this is my branch, choice selected to no, I chose choice 2, then hey, never mind, change the game speed, and hey, never mind. Now it's going to go back to waiting. Right? Message is ended. But if I chose yes, right, choice 1 selected, now I'm in this one where it's going to set the switch, and the switch goes from, let's see here, it's going to darken, and then I give it about a little over 2 seconds, and now I'm changing the switch to nighttime. Nighttime is now on. Unconditionally, it now goes back to waiting. And it's the same thing on this side, except the roles are switched if you want it to go from nighttime to morning or morning to nighttime. Items. Okay. This is where I program all of my use. If I have the red book selected, right? So essentially, as long as my current item is number 1, which the red book is slot 1, then it's going to call the red book, which is a menu scene actually. It's going to slow down the game speed, and it's going to play a little bit of music. And when I exit out of the book reading, and I can do that with any one of these buttons, it's now going to hide the book, and it's going to go away. For the blue book, if you remember, I made it so that the player couldn't read the blue book. Same thing. It has to check to make sure that the current item is 2 and the blue book is slot number 2. On the use item button, it's going to show this message. And it's going to have a little bit of audio playback as well, just because I like to have audio playback. I don't know. And same thing with the phone. Essentially, what I want you to know is if you want to use the item object, this is where you need to tell the game what to do when the player presses use item and that item is selected. Now, all of these items below it have the same logic. So I'm only going to go through one of them just for the sake of time. When it's idle, it's literally doing nothing. It does have a field of vision that will tell it when the player has touched it. And the condition is discovered by other objects set by the player. So if the player goes inside that field of view, it is now going to increase slot 5. Right, this little Swiss Army knife is slot 5. It's going to increase it by 1. Then it's going to destroy it off the screen, and it's going to play a little sound to tell the player that they picked it up. And now here's where all of my UI stuff is. I have my phone, which is really nothing right now. In the next version of this UI, you will have a phone. The next one is the book, which also is really nothing, and your heads-up display. So I have my keyboard. This is how it shows you that visual feedback of exactly what's being pushed right now. This shows it being unpushed, and this shows it being pushed. And essentially, it does that based on what you're pressing, right, on release. Day and time. Okay. This is actually, so all these things right here, all these things here in the UI pack is actually placed on the HUD. And I'll show you. See all these things that are like kind of off screen right now? Take objects here. Alright, so this is my nighttime controller. Let's see here. Pause signal, menu logic, inventory color. We're gonna get all, I'm getting ahead of myself right now. All of these are hidden items that run a certain logic. And as long as they're on the HUD, then it will always be accessible. If it's not on the HUD, then you're gonna run into some kind of problems. Alright. Moving back to this, it switches between morning and evening based on, hey, is the nighttime switch on or is it off? And it will change the text to reflect exactly that. This is where it feeds the player what day it is. It'll start on Monday, and if the switch is, or I'm sorry, if the variable is now 2, it's going to go to Tuesday. If the variable is now 3, it's going to go to Wednesday. All the way to Sunday, right? If the variable is 7, there's only 7 days in a week, it is now Sunday, but we want it to go back to Monday. So as long as it's Sunday, right? If the switch now increases to 8, which, hey, there's not 8 days in a week, it's going to reset to that day of the week variable to 1, which is going to unconditionally send it to Monday. That's how the days of the week work. And all of these items right here, there's no logic attached to them, but they're used to kind of show other items on the UI. Okay, my coin counter. For those of you that want to, this is nothing more than an icon, and it has a parent-child attached to it that displays how much money the player has. All right, and it's using the variable currency to display that, and a little bit of offset so that it's not on top of the icon. The day counter, and the nighttime controller, which I think we already went over, right? No, we didn't go over this already. We went over the a different nighttime item. Now this thing is not the same thing as a nighttime controller. What this item does is this puts on the darkening layer, and that's pretty much it. It does nothing else. So as long as the switch is nighttime is off, then it's going to brighten up the screen. All right, and as long as nighttime is on, we're going to go over here. If nighttime is on, so it checks for that switch twice actually, then we're going to darken it. Now the nighttime effect is on. That's essentially it does. It goes in one big stupid loop with the nighttime effect on or off. Now my inventory BG item is very similar to how I have the book and the phone. I also have a little shop part here, but this is not being used for anything like that. Maybe in the future I'll have a shop included in future versions of my UI pack. And the item box, which does nothing besides houses the item. Now, as we continue through everything else here, you'll see the inventory color. And the entire kind of piece here is that it sits here on your HUD doing nothing until the player presses Y, which is the inventory button, and then it shows the menu scene, which is the inventory scene that you saw earlier. It slows down the game speed to 0, and it plays a little sound. That's all. But when it calls the menu, it also calls all these objects as well. All right. Now, if you watched my previous video on my older version of the inventory UI, you'll remember this kind of spaghetti code here. And all that this does is it signals to other objects what slot the player is in. So slot 1, it's going to play a little sound, and it's going to change current slot to slot 1 and current item to item 1. And it's going to follow that node convention all the way through slot 35. So you see here, this is all the same thing as slot 1, except, hey, now the variable, or I'm sorry, the variable is 35 for current slot, and current item is also 35. So if I go into 11, it's going to say current item, current slot 11, etc. And all these things change based on nothing more than whether the player presses down or presses up. So you don't see it in this object, but the player essentially just moves down to different slots, and that actuates what all of these other items do. And if you're wondering what these things here on the on the outlying areas are, this is so that the cursor can jump from one side of the menu to the other. So, like slot 1, this is a shortcut to slot 7. So if the player presses left when they're on slot 1, boom, they're going to end up on slot 7. And slot 7 is over here. Same thing for 35. And if they press up on slot 7, they're going to end up on 35 and vice versa. This is the default action. This is what's off screen here. This is what you see. If you go to the HUD, you'll see a little green box. And on specified object actions, when the inventory is called, that's what it's waiting for. It's going to go to the memory. The memory box remembers what the current item is, so that when you select an item, the cursor remembers what item slot you were on. And it's going to go back to that current item. So if you look at it, this one goes to slot 3. And it's going to check to make sure current slot is 3. And if it is, then the cursor, as soon as you open the inventory, is going to remember, hey, I was on slot 3, and this is where I need to be. Now, upon the, when you want to get out of the menu, what's going to happen is, let's say you're on slot 6 over here, and we follow this link here. As long as the player presses any one of these buttons, it's going to hide the menu, which, as you see here, it says hide menu scene. It's going to play a little audio, and then let's see here. It gives it 1 second before it goes to return the game, and then it changes the game speed back to 100%. All right. And it pretty much follows that convention throughout the entire spaghetti string that you see here. Everything else, this is pretty simple as well, the inventory selection cursor. And all this does is displays the little selection cursor pointer thing that tells the player what slot they're on. That's it. As long as the player is on slot 1, right? So all of these default to off where nothing is being shown. But if the inventory signaler, which is what we were just on, the action is slot 1, then it's going to show it. And as long as it is not slot 1, see right here I have checked off when not doing specified action. As long as it is not doing slot 1, then it is not going to show. And that is the same for every single item here. Now, how does this really work, though? All right, there's one more thing you got to understand before we continue on to the next object item here, is that, let's see here. Here it is. Is that all of these, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this cursor here, This one says slot 1 on, slot 2 on, slot 3 on. You have to make sure that the action on appearance for each slot reflects the appropriate, what do you call it? The appropriate slot that we're looking for. And of course, all the way down here, slot 35 is going to check to make sure slot 35 is on. All right. Item description display. This is a little bit different than the way that the other ones go with. There is a hidden item on the HUD that is going to be off screen, but it's going to be there, and it's checking to make sure that these conditions are set. As long as the inventory signaler is on slot 1, just like the cursor, and also, all right, slot 1 is greater than or equal to 1, which means that you have the item, then it's going to display this text description below the item box. And it's the same thing for everything else. The same conditions apply for slot 8. As long as these two things are true, then it's going to display this item description. And it's going to go back to no image if you are not on that slot. So essentially, it's kind of copy pasta from the cursor signaler. But this is important that it's this way, because otherwise it's going to show your item descriptions even if you don't have the item. And we don't want that. Okay, item display. More copy pasta from when we did the cursors. And if we go to the scenes, you're going to see that, let's see here. All right, slot 1 on, slot 2 on, slot 3 on, slot 4 on. And it follows that same convention all the way across the inventory. And this is exactly where it's calling it from. So I put this object, this portion of the object on the menu scene, this portion of the object, and this portion of the object on the inventory scene in order to achieve that effect. Now, if you do not have this item, it's not going to show anything. But it checks. It checks to make sure that slot 8 is greater than or equal to 1, meaning you have one. Then it's going to display it. But if slot 8 is less than or equal to 0, not going to show it. So now it doesn't populate in your inventory. Okay, the current item object. This thing's whole purpose is to, let's go to the HUD here, is to show what object you have selected right here. And let me see if I can select it here. All right, action on appearance is item icon, right? No item. So that's this right here. Okay, so let's say the player picks up a crowbar. He has it in his inventory, and now he selects it in the inventory. Okay, it's going to check to see if current item is number 4 and the slot is greater than or equal to 1. All right, both of those things have to be true in order for it to display in your inventory. Or I'm sorry, in order to display in the item box. Now it has to check to make sure that if you have the item before it goes in there. Otherwise, it's going to show if you select that box and you didn't even pick up that item yet. All right. That's pretty much it for the inventory portion. But there's still a few other little knickknacks I threw in here, and that's the pause menu. So this follows the same method as the inventory. Let's play test that because I don't think I showed it to you earlier. Right? So pause. Here we go. And I can choose any one of these things right here, and it'll do what I ask it to. Right? Let's just quit. There we go. It quit. And that's all based on this right here, where where you see it here, it is waiting for a call, and it's checking to make sure that the caller actually calls it. Now you're in resume. Okay, the resume icon is going to show, or I'm sorry, this is the object action, and the listener logic is going to show you whether or not the text is read or text is not read. Okay, so here we are, and it's going to play a menu switch sound every time you switch to a different object action here. And the conditions to move are down and up, right? And the conditions to exit are if the player presses A while quit is active. And in similar fashion to the other means, if the object action is on resume, then the text is going to be red, and if it's not on resume, then it's going to be white. I do have a startup menu here, but I don't have it. You can use this however you want, but I don't have it active in the sample for now, but I am leaving the resources in there if you are interested in using it. That's pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions, you can join the unofficial Discord for Pixel Game Maker MV, and you can find me, or you can contact me directly, whichever way you prefer. Ask me, if you have any questions or something like that I missed. But I'd definitely like to recommend everybody here that you go to the unofficial Pixel Game Maker MV Discord. There's a whole bunch of people in there dedicated to helping you out every single day. And, without their help, I probably would have had this engine that I didn't know how to use, and I probably would still be struggling it to this day. So big shout out to those guys. Check the description for some tutorials from some probably much better Pixel Game Makers than I am. And y'all have a great day.